right? Alignment procedures. First thing you're supposed to do when you're getting ready to do an alignment is perform vehicle pre-checks, vehicle stability and handling for the result of vehicle systems such as suspension, wheels, steering, bearing, and tires. So if you've got anything wrong with any of that stuff, you're wasting your time doing an alignment. The other day we had one in here. You remember the one we were working on, the 08 Impala that came in here and it was pulling. Remember that? Who was working on that alignment? You and who else? Were you with him? Y'all were working on that. So y'all worked on a four-wheel alignment. You got it all lined up, right? You got through lining everything up just like it was supposed to. It was still pulling in the same direction it was when it came in here, even though you went all the trouble like that. Well, what did we do then? We swapped the tires. The tires looked good, didn't they? But we swapped the tires and it pulled the other way. So we know we had a tire pull. Got it? That's how you determine if you got a tire pull. And then what did we do so we could give it back to him not pulling at all? Put him to the back.
Was that a Columbia's car?
That was the dark blue one that Crudup drives. Impala, the one that President Rydell used to drive. Yeah. All right. So the best alignment system and experienced technician will never be able to compensate for damage to worn components. Right? And you got to ensure that all the steering and suspension components are in acceptable working conditions. Okay, how many of you, if I say the words dry park check, does anybody know what that is?
Dry park check.
Dry park check. Anybody know? You have somebody get down, or you get down on there with your flashlight and you lay under that car where you can see those suspension components, and, I mean the steering components particularly, and you have somebody turn the wheel a little bit back and forth.
Oh.
Not all the way back and forth, just a little bit, and you look for what's loose under there.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
That's called a dry park check in some of the textbooks. Now, I will be honest, until I read some of the textbooks, I never heard that term used before, but I've done that a lot. I'd lay down under there and see what was loose.
Check the tire rods and everything.
Yeah, all that. Make sure that that stuff is good. It's really important, particularly if you're inspecting a 15-passenger van or something like that, to make sure that you take your job seriously and get under there and look at those front end parts and don't just say, that'd be I. Check it off. Because if there's 15 passengers right in there and they go off in the canyon because the tire rod end came apart because you didn't catch it, you know, you may have had good cornbread that night and enjoyed the movie you watched before you went to bed, but they went off in the canyon because you were remiss in your duties. Be really, really careful. Take this very seriously. All right, depending on the steps that were followed to verify the customer's concerns, some of the pre-checks may have already been performed, so always refer to the appropriate workshop manual for specific pre-checks on the vehicle in question. Now, we got tires we're going to look at. These are on the ground pre-checks. We got rapid shoulder wear. What causes that?
That's going to be underinflation.
If you're riding on one side of your tire much more than the others because of tow or caster.
Well, if we're wearing heavy on both sides, that's typically going to be under inflation. Because the center of the tire is going to dip in and the outer part's going to wear more. What about this one here, rapid center wear?
Overinflation.
It's not really a good illustration of that, but if you've got center wear that's worn out in these right here, what you're going to have is it bellies out when you put too much air in it, and it causes it to wear the center tread out more. Now, it doesn't dish like this. It's just a bad drawing. I could have fixed that if I put it in paint, but I didn't think about it. Cracked treads.
That's old tires.
Yeah, that's basically you're going to look at it. How can you tell if a tire is too old? How old is too old for a tire?
Because it's got a date of manufacture on it.
It does. So how old is too old though?
5 years.
Well, it's actually 6 according to some of the people that I've talked to. But basically, if you look at a tire, say a lot of times we'll go get used tires. And we just look at the tread, or, well, it looks pretty good, so we pop it on there, and all that kind of thing. So what happens is if you don't look at the date on the tire, and most of the time, about 90% of the time, you can look at the date and you can tell, you know, because it's going to have 4004 or something like that. That's the 40th week of 2004 was when it was made. And my wife kills ants in the driveway on her car, basically. She don't go anywhere on it much. So we have to put her Explorer's got 20,000 miles on it, and I've already had to replace the tires once because they drive right in. But she just doesn't use it a lot. And she doesn't wear the tire down. Of course, when she puts it on there, she has to have Michelin's, you know, and so on. But she wants really good tires, and there's nothing wrong with that. Okay, so you got wear on one side. That's usually caused by some kind of an alignment issue. Now, the front tires are going to wear different from the back ones because when you're steering, particularly in parking lot situations like Gene on the truck that he drives, he's basically grinding the front tires off because he's going around curves a lot. turning sharp, going, you know, on this asphalt and everything. Feathered edge, bald spots, scalloped wear, all manner of things can cause that. Basically, if you see any of these conditions, you need to make sure that you recognize them. So you're going to do this, another little on ground. Following pre-checks on the ground. All 4 tires for right. If somebody's doing an alignment and they don't check the air pressure before they do the alignment, they are not doing it right. You better check that doggone air pressure before you do anything else. Really important. The uniform wear patterns, which is what we just covered. Correct size and profile, appearance of abnormal wear pattern. You got to check the action of shock absorbers. Don't bounce the rear of the vehicle to see if movement's properly dampened. Have you ever seen one when somebody stops or something go boing, boing, boing? We had a 05 Cadillac CTS pull in here one day. Hit the brake and just bounce and bounce and bounce. Those shocks were about $100 a pop. The front one was shot. Didn't have any miles on it either. Check the vehicle for optional suspension equipment such as heavy duty handling or trailer tow suspensions. If somebody has beefed up the suspension, it's going to change the way it rides.
Or the air ride.
Yep, that too. Check vehicle attitude for evidence of possible overload or sagging. In other words, if you haven't looked in the trunk and they've got a bunch of copper wire back there or something that's weighing it down and you're going to get skewed alignment. You may line it up while that hogwash in the trunk, but what you're going to see is the alignment angle is going to change when you take stuff out of the trunk. Things change whenever that weight shifts. Check for evidence of sheet metal repair that would indicate the vehicle's been in an accident. Overspray, somebody put a fender on it. Has this thing been hit? Why is it in here for alignment to begin with? And a really, really good body shop has all the specs and everything for straightening the frame, and they'll have a really nice frame straightener, and they'll, you know, use hydraulics and pull that thing back around like it's supposed to be. Wiregrass Body and Frame and Enterprise does really, really good work on that kind of thing. And, they also guarantee all their paint for life, and I like to use them. Okay. All right. Put it on the left. Disable the air suspension if it's equipped with it. We've talked about that before. You don't turn off the air suspension. When you lay it back, let it back down, it's going to squat down. You're going to wait till the compressor pumps it back up. All right. If the alignment rack has ramps, drive it onto the rack. That's what makes that big noise when you're driving on the rack. And if somebody's driving one onto the rack and it goes boom, boom, and everybody looks over there to see what that noise is because it sounds like somebody hit something, you know. If it uses stands, raise it with a hoist. But this one here, you know, we drive up on ours. Center it on the alignment rack. Make sure that the thing's in the middle. You know, it's something you probably ought to practice doing. I'll tell you something else everybody needs to be able to do too. And I'd actually have one guy come back over here and spend a day with me training himself to pull that little Escort with that manual transmission to it up on the alignment lift without driving it off the other end. You know what I mean? He had actually learned to do that because he couldn't drive a stick. And so furthermore, they were expecting him to pull one up on the alignment lift. Who can drive a stick in here?
I can.
You can. Who can't?
Depending on how touched the clutch is, I can drive one.
Okay.
I can drive one.
If the clutch is not too touchy, I can drive one.
That don't-
All right, how would you describe that to somebody? If you were just going to talk about driving one,
It's a
if you were going to talk about, to explain to somebody with words how to drive a stick successfully.
You gotta find the friction point. You gotta pull the clutch out till you find that friction
I
point.
know, but I'm dumb. I say, oh, you know what a friction point is.
Once you find that, well, when you try it, you'll know. Find that friction point and start giving the gas.
Here's what I do. I like to set my heel on the floor,
Yep,
and I like to hinge it
that's what I do.
with the heel. Because you got a lot more control that way than you do using a big old thigh muscle up here. Because it's going to go boom, like that. But if you use that, as soon as you feel it start to grab, you freeze that foot. And you pick up a little speed, and then you come on off of it.
Yep.
See what I'm saying? I had to teach my daughter how to do that when she was 12. And she was kind of clumsy with it for a little bit. But she got it. I taught the boys how to do it in a dune buggy we built. Man, they jumped terraces and everything else. But they could drive a stick when they were through. You know? 10 years old, 11, you know. That's really fun how fast kids can learn if they've never driven anything else and you teach them to drive a stick and they've never even sat down in a car before. They can learn to drive a stick with blazing speed. But if you got somebody that's been used to doing the Prindle stick thing, then they have a horrible time because they just don't like that. But if you can't drive a stick and you're going to work as a mechanic, you may know everything else. But if you have to go tell somebody else to pull the car in for you, these other mechanics are going they're laughing at you behind their hand, you know.
Richard,
Yeah.
Garrett had to do that to me every day.
Yeah, bless his heart. He said, you wouldn't expect him to be able to drive a stick, would you? The vehicle must be centered in order to achieve the proper alignment readings. Make doggone sure you center the vehicle. I got off on a rabbit trail, and for that I apologize. Ensure that each wheel in the vehicle is directly over the center of the slip plate and turning angle gauges. But what I like to do, like I'm always saying, and this is what the Hunter engineering guy will say, you don't drive it onto the slip plates, you stop it right before you get to them. put it in neutral, use your wheel chocks, roll it by hand on the flip plates, and then pull your pins, right? Now this thing right here is going to give you, you know, some slightly different. If the wheels aren't in the middle of the turning angle gauges, and that's those round things that's got the, you know, that I was talking about, they won't turn effectively to perform the caster swing. So you're going to raise it off the floor. Now this is another on hoist pre-check. We haven't even hung our sensors yet. Got me? We haven't hung our sensors yet. We're going to raise this thing off the floor, and this is not something I've been having y'all do, but you're supposed to do it. Get it off the floor and grab it like this. Don't. And if you get this and that, suspect wheel bearing issues because you got them. Now, if you only get it this way but not that way, you're going to look at your tie rod ends and stuff, which is why. Who had tie rod ends the other day? You did. He had inner and outers that he had to do with Mom's and it drives really good now still on it. So this the steering wheel's crooked, right? We did. All right, we dropped the ball on that. All right, so that's because we never even put it on the lift. We lined it up just like you were talking about with a tape measure.
Yeah.
You know, just because we were in a hurry to get it so he could go with it.
Well, if you could get somebody to sit there and hold on to the steering wheel while you're doing it, it'll stay
Yeah, as
straight.
long as the steering wheel's straight, you're okay. And if it's the same distance apart on the front end and the rear of the tire, you're pretty close, you know, but I always like to put it on the lift anyway. 12 o'clock and 6 o'clock, that's like basically here and here, and you're going to do this right here. Grass to the side, 3 o'clock and 9 o'clock, and rock each wheel. If they shake from side to side, but not top and bottom, there's excess play in the steering linkage, which is going to be your, okay, if the wheels shake both of them, and then you're going to look at the wheel bearings and see if it may need those. You could have wheel bearings in. And you know the ones that are the worst to do this wearing out thing is trucks, four-wheel drive trucks with them big fat wheels on them, tires on them. Wears it out. All right, check for loose suspension, steering nuts and bolts. There was a lady that came in here one time on a Ford Fusion that was used, and she bought it from a GM dealer that wasn't far from here. And she said, I'm hearing a noise whenever I turn on this thing. And I said, they said, well, we don't work on no Fords right here, so get on out of here with your bad self. And so she came over here and asked us, well, she's a student here. She came over and asked us if she'd look at it. And I said, sure, we'll. And we got up under there, and one of the suspension bolts was just about completely out of there. I mean, it had worked loose and was coming out, and it wasn't quite out. And if it had come out while she was driving, it would have been disaster, particularly if she was driving at highway speed. Boom, go over a bump between here and Andalusia, you know, boom, all that stuff. And see, they weren't even interested in looking under it. But it wasn't hard to see. You look under it, and the bolts, you can see it's just a naked bolt sticking out 3 or 4 inches and all that. That's why it's important to look at that. This is what's terrible. If you miss something like that, when you worked on it, if you threw an alignment up there and didn't take all these other checks seriously, and then they have something that comes apart on them, even though you didn't loosen it up, you also didn't catch it, and it's on you. You see what I mean? Bad idea. Check the steering gear mountings and tie rod connections for looseness. You know, when you turn it and you see the rack moving, because it's not anchored good, you got issues with that. Check for broken or worn suspension springs, leaking or damaged shocks. That's part of our test that stuff we do on our vehicle inspections. Steering tie rod shaft U-joints, boots for rips, cuts, or leaks, and check for dragging brakes. Dragging brakes can make them do crazy things. It'll make it feel like an alignment problem. Now, what's the difference between sprung and unsprung components? Can anybody tell me that? If I'm saying I want you to go out here on this vehicle that's on the lift and point out the components that are sprung and the ones that are unsprung. Who knows the difference between sprung and unsprung components? I've mentioned this, I think, once before in here. If it's sitting on springs, it's sprung.
Yeah.
If it's not sitting on springs, it's not. So give me something that's not sitting on springs. Everything that's below the spring. Like, you know, your lower control arm, tires, all that stuff is unsprung. You got it? But now watch this. Ride height refers to a suspension measurement from unsprung components to sprung components. That's not the same thing as trim height. You understand what I'm saying? Ride height and trim height. The trim height is how level the body looks, and it's measured. You've seen a car sitting crooked, you know, unlevel. That's trim height. Ride height is basically something you're going to measure underneath. You know that little machine over there? You ever seen that when you first pull up the car? It's giving you all these ride height measurements. You see, if you're really a stickler and you want to really do front end stuff, you're not going to go to everywhere. If you find a guy in a front end alignment rack that's measuring those things, we're going to find an unusual character. But that is something that we're supposed to basically know how to measure. Now, they're all set with a vehicle at a predetermined ride height. If it's not in that ride height, the alignment angles are not going to be right, and you may wind up with making faulty adjustments. That's one of the reasons that ride height is something that machine illustrates just really. I mean, it's got concise illustrations that tells you exactly what it's supposed to be. Somebody went to a lot of trouble to put all that in the software, you know what? You got to refer to the illustration on the alignment machine to determine which points to measure, what the specifications should be, what the allowable tolerances are overall. This is basically your ride height. Take the vehicle ride height measurements and compare them to the specs, which is on the screen. If the ride height's not right, you got to do what you need to, springs or whatever, adjustments of torsion bars, you know, this kind of thing. Make sure the sensors are on the proper wheels. Don't drop the sensors, okay? Because if the sensors hit the floor, really expensive. I heard one hit the floor the other day, and what I heard was blam, and then I heard Melissa wasn't even on that side of the car, but I heard her say, ah, or something. You made some kind of a loud noise. And she had to go over to help Quincy pick the sensor up off the floor. You know, it was a miracle it wasn't totally destroyed. And one of the things we don't want to have is this attitude that, well, it ain't mine, so I don't care if it falls on the floor or not. I just go home and eat my cornbread and watch a movie, you know, let somebody else pay the bill.
I just say not it.
Huh? Yeah. Not me, not me. Use the rubber bungee strap to hold it on there. This one here came with rubber bungee straps. You're going to perform the run-out compensation. You know how whenever you go 45 degrees back, you just roll it 45 degrees back, you level your sensors and push OK, and then you go 45 degrees forward. That's basically giving you everything you need to know about how much out of, you know, lateral run-out or whatever thing's got. Wheel and hub, sensor located on the alignment head. Failure to properly compensate will cause the alignment to mistakenly calculate the alignment angle. Now this is very small angle differences, but if somebody else hangs it and they compensate and they get different readings from what you did, that'll be the reason why. Lower the vehicle with the slip plates, set the park and brake, place the transmission in neutral. Some alignment racks have got rear slip plates, ours does. Pull them out. Why do you have slip plates to begin with? When you're adjusting the tires, you want them to move easily. You don't want them rubber dragging on the you know, metal. It's just not good. You can't align something like that. You got to be able. It's got to be able to move. Jounce the front and rear suspension. This is whenever you're getting ready. Did you know you're supposed to actually kind of bounce it and let it find where it wants to be before you start that? Now sometimes you'll bounce it and the angles will change after you've already adjusted it because it was bound up a little bit. It's really interesting how that works. Set it by jouncing the front and rear of the vehicle while it's sitting on the slip plates, and you put your lock mechanism on the brake pedal. You know what that looks like, right? That's that rod. It pushes the brake pedal and it goes against the seat. It's an adjustable one. You want to ensure the wheels don't move while you're taking your steering axis inclination and the included angle measurements. Apply the brake pedal to pressure inside the passenger compartment. Now those SAI measurements are the non-adjustable. The included angle and all that, you know. All right, now right here you got your caster swing. It needs to be executed from a steering wheel. I've seen about 646,000 front-end guys grab the wheels and turn them. You know, do this. And basically you're supposed to stand on that thing and turn the steering wheel. You're going, how far do you go? How many degrees? Who remembers? No, not that way. I'm talking about when you're turning the wheels, doing your caster swing. 10, and back to the middle, right?
Yep.
That's enough to give you a caster swing. All right. Now this right here, if a measurement is within specifications, don't bother to adjust it. Now basically the machine is going to give you the specifications. In the olden days, you had to look them up, right? The only time adjustments should be made is when the measurement's out of spec or the side-to-side difference is great enough to cause a pull or wear problem. It's going to tell you in the middle about what the side-to-side difference is, right? That middle field between the toe and all, it'll have the left toe, the right toe, and then what the difference is between the two, and that's an important number too. On most alignment system, camera and toe readings are live. That means they're actual current measurements. You can actually adjust it while you watch the numbers change. You cannot adjust caster that way. You may think you're getting a reading and you're watching a reading change up there, but you've got to do another caster sweep to get your next caster measurement so you'll know where you need to go. You understand that? Remember, caster is not a live one. So tell you, Strand, say that with me. Caster is not a live measurement, but camera and toe are. Whether it's in the front, whether it's in the rear, camera and toe are live. Now there is no such thing as rear caster. Why? No such thing as rear caster. Huh?
Rear wheel steering.
The rear wheels don't turn. Well, I don't know. Maybe if it's got four-wheel steering, you may have some rear caster. Huh? Yeah. All right. Caster and camera should always be adjusted first and toe last. Does everybody understand that? Caster first if you're going to adjust caster. camber, and then toe. Because toe is not going to change those other ones, but those other ones will change toe. That makes sense? All right. Additionally, since the front alignment settings are referenced from the rear thrust line, all rear adjustments should be completed before adjusting the front. Even if you don't have rear adjustments, it's not a bad idea to look at the back ones. Because you can actually click on the rear wheels and see what that is, see what that looks like, right? All right. Okay, here we go. We've been in here 20 minutes. This is adjustment methods. They vary. This is not all of them. You know the ones that I think are the coolest ones? Well, there's a couple of really cool ones. The Crown Victoria, right up there on the top, has got two different eccentrics. It's just right next to each other, and you can set camber and caster right up there on the top, real easy. I was trying to get somebody to do that the other day, and one of the ways that I can tell that somebody didn't do the job they were supposed to do when they were completing the worksheet is if they ram it back to the road real quick and pull it off the lift before I get a chance to look at anything. You know what I mean? You ever see anybody do that? I mean, I don't even come over here looking because they may be doing more work, so I'm just going to drop it off the lift real quick until I was done with it. Maybe I can get the sheet off my board even though I didn't learn anything. Is that good? That's not good, is it? Tell me that's not good. That's not good. Everybody knows that's not good. Does everybody know that's not good? Everybody knows that's not good. All right. Something else will happen is I'll say,
good.
I actually need to see, I went over here and I see everybody pulling such and such a component apart. And I see them in their hand, and I know that they did it. And then I'll see somebody say, I pull this, you know, I'm through with this one here. Well, I never saw the part in their hand, and it looks like they just rushed through it and only did part of it and pulled it out. You know what I mean? I have had people in automatic transmissions, when I would walk by and they're doing an old trailer transmission over there, they'd say, I'm through, and they already have the pan back on it. Well, I pull the pan off, and they just threw a bunch of stuff in there and put the pan on it. These people do not need to be working on cars. I mean, they just don't, you know what I mean? Now, you can change oil if you're really careful, right? Okay, so we got elongated holes, eccentric cams, shim packs, and bushings. That just about covers it, right? As far as caster and camber. All right, there's your eccentric cam. Now, what happens? Let me ask you this. What's going to happen if I loosen this up and I start turning this and I keep turning it? What happens then? Does it just keep on moving out? Does it ever stop moving out? It's egg-shaped. If you keep turning it, it's going to go back and forth. You can turn it far enough to where it starts going back the other direction, right? You get me? I thought everybody could look at that and figure it out, but I had one guy that was asked that question by somebody really important. And they said, what if I just kept turning this eccentric? He said, well, I guess it would just keep going in the same direction that you were turning it. What's it going to just move on forever and ever? No, it's a doggone eccentric. It's going to go back and forth. Always just remember that. You know, don't embarrass us here, you know. Moving the front and rear of the control arm inward or outward to equally adjust the camber only, right? So basically, you're moving, you got a triangular thing here, and if I move, the ball joint's out here at the tip of my fingers, if I move it like this, I'm changing camber, right? Because camber is the tilt of the wheel this way. If I move it, just one of them, notice how I'm moving that ball joint forward and back in relation to the lower ball joint. I'm basically changing caster by just moving one of them. So you set your caster first, get it right, and then you camber, you got to move both exactly the same amount. You got it? And then you got toe, which is the other that you're going to set last. All right, let's move over here. And this right here, some of them you got to use a doggone caster and camber elongated a little bit. You see what's going on with the noise with this? Well, that's the dumpster guy. All right. Some of them with struts on the top of the shock tower, you got to punch out some spot welds. And you got to elongate holes in order to set your camera and stuff. Those are a pain, unless somebody's already done it. This is what a spot weld remover looks like. You seen one of those before? That's just for drilling out spot welds. You can buy one of those online. They don't cost very much. All it's for is that. Center punch the spot welds on the alignment plates, loosen the 3 nuts, use the appropriate spot weld drill crit to remove the 4 welds, and don't cut deeper than necessary because you don't want to make damage. So basically that's a pretty cool tool there that I pulled up for you. Then you got shims. Now those shims, some of the General Motors stuff, even up to 2000, like some of the little S10s and stuff, they got shims. And the shims are the way things were done for years and years and years. If you're comfortable with that, it's just fine. If you'd rather have eccentrics, it's a pain and you feel like you're being punished dreadfully if you have 2 shims. How many of you have seen one of these? Probably sell these at a parts store. Eccentric bushings for the Fords that have I-beam suspension. That's what those are. You're going to take the bushing out that's in there because it's basically going to have a locator that won't let you turn it. You put one in there and it's got a wrench flats on it. and you got various different degrees you can get to set your camber caster with those. All right. And there's your toe adjustment. Everybody here, did you ever notice how in the machine over there, they never say anything about this is how you do a toe adjustment? They never say that because any bozo can figure out how to do a toe adjustment. If you see something like this on the back of the car, you'll set rear toe like that. All right, now then, everybody know, tell me what the right answers to these questions are. They point the camera back at me, which is, I'm a lot better looking than that screen up there anyway. So, all right. The only time wheel alignment adjustment should be made is when?
After all the pre-checks are complete.
Come on. Whenever measurement is out of specifications or side-to-side different is great enough to cause a polar wear pattern. Can you write that down? Can you remember it? Will you get that right if I put it on a final exam? That's it. Don't turn it into a skeleton on me now. Most caster and camber adjustments on late model vehicles are performed with what? Huh? No, that's the old ones.
You said old, late model?
No, late model is new. Late model is new. Late means yesterday. Yeah. Early is, 64.
Yeah.
Got it? After adjusting caster, camber, and toe, what should be done to prevent damage to the slip plates? I'm preaching that all the time, guys. And every time I turn around, somebody's leaving without putting the pins back in the slip plates. The slip plates are just dancing around over there. Isn't that right? Who has left the pins out of the slip plates right here? Has anybody done that? Look at that. That girl is so honest. Everybody else is not me, not me, not me. You see that? All right. According to this handout, what's probably the most difficult part of performing an alignment? Interpreting alignment measurements. I actually didn't say that, but that's what it is. Basically, when you look at alignment measurements, if you don't have anything to compare them to, you're going to be scratching your head. Which of the following is not a method of adjusting caster into camber? Threaded sleeves. What do you adjust with threaded sleeves?
Toe, right?
Bingo. Caster is adjusted by moving what piece inward or outward? Come on, guys.
Bearing.
Huh?
The bearing.
Ball joint.
Ball joint, upper ball joint, which would be a control arm. Camber is adjusted by moving what piece inward or outward?
Control arm.
When adjusting the toe on a 98 F-Series pickup, each increment of the notches on the frame represents 0.4 degrees, and that is true. Service adjuster bushings are used to adjust caster and camber on some F-Series trucks. That's true. And what do the numbers on this particular bushing mean? That particular bushing.
1/4 inch diameter.
Well, the first number is the amount of caster. The second number is the amount of camber in degrees if the adjuster is installed in the right-hand axle position. If the adjuster is in the left-hand axle, the caster number is the opposite sign of the number shown. So it'll be minus instead of plus, right? A positive amount of right-hand axle is a negative amount in the left-hand axle, and a negative amount in the right-hand axle is a positive amount in the left-hand position. So basically, you're going to have to get used to those numbers. Now, if you're doing a lot of F-Series trucks, you're going to see that kind of thing. All right. All right, does everybody know more about alignment procedures than they did? Are you happy with what you learned in that particular little presentation?